So we're going to go through the presentation sort of in two halves. So I'm going to kick off. So I'm Sarah Sturgess, Agency Director at SMRS. As we've been sort of talked about a little bit already, we're specialists in employer branding. So needless to say, I'm going to talk to you a bit more about employer branding. And also about the fact that employer branding really is something that isn't necessarily for huge organisations. We've got 5 case studies that we're going to take you through today. Each are completely different. You'll be pleased to know there's some nice video for you to watch as well, so you won't have to only listen to my dulcet tones. But yeah, so we'll crack on and then questions at the end, if that's okay. I think the first thing I wanted to do was just make an overarching statement around what an employer brand is. And there's so many definitions of employer branding, and I'm not sure sort of whether anyone's actually traced it back, but employer branding was first talked about in 1990 at the CIPD conference. And I think the definitions that you see out there all boil down to pretty much what we've got on screen here. So it's what people think and feel about an employer as a place to work, an organisation's reputation as an employer and its offer to its people. So nice and simple. I think one of the things that has also changed quite a lot over the last, 25 years really, but has become really, really common in the last 5 years is storytelling. So organisations using employer branding to tell the story of their organisation, helping to get across what the culture of working somewhere is like, what the values and behaviours are that people exhibit who fit in certain organisations. And I think a large part of that growth in storytelling has come through the growth as well in social media. The fact that everyone's employer brand now is out there in the market. It's seen across all the different channels. You know, things like Glassdoor as well allows people that online opportunity to talk about what it's like to work at different places. And I think that what we've certainly seen as experts in this area is a massive growth over the last 3 or 4 years in particular. What I find really interesting as well is that quite often people will come to us and they'll say, we don't have an employer brand. And I think one of the main things that everybody in this room will be experiencing is you do have an employer brand. The question is more what you're doing with it and what more could you be doing with your employer brand. So a few more sort of sections to cover here. I think it's really, really important that an employer brand is true about who you are as an organisation. It has to be authentic. It has to be something that when people come and work for you who've seen your employer brand externally, they don't get a shock. They don't suddenly think this is nothing like I was expecting, because that just leads to high attrition. I think also it has to be meaningful to the people who currently sit within your organisation as well, so that they can be empowered and they can feel engaged with what it's like to work for you. But ultimately, a lot of people here will be really focused on attraction and how you can attract the right people into your organisation. So many different challenges in attraction at the moment. Technical skills, digital skills we hear about all of the time. Carl, who's going to be on stage with me shortly, around nurses. You know, if anyone heard the news today, people are not coming into the UK to go into nursing roles. So it's a massive crisis in certain sectors. So I think the key point is you have an employer brand. There is certainly opportunity to think about how you develop that employer brand. What I did do a little bit of research on as well was who got there first. So some of the companies that you see on the screen here are people who've been talking and developing their employer brands for many, many years. I'm going to pick out Virgin because it's the easiest one to use as an example. I think in terms of one of the most sort of popular, the most well-known leaders of an organisation within Richard Branson, who actually leads what is a 60,000 people business across 100 different companies and across 50 different countries. So it's a huge organisation, and Virgin have managed to have that red thread, as they describe it, that runs through Virgin as an organisation. Just a quick hands in the air. who has heard of the choose your number of holidays that you take, the Virgin initiative? Has everyone heard of that? Yeah. So basically, they announced that people within Virgin could take as many holidays as they wanted, and they would be free to choose pretty much when they took them. And the idea of that is that will keep people more engaged with working there. I think a lot of employer branding as well, you talk about EVP, so the unique, the employer value proposition and what makes working somewhere unique. I think that is a perfect example of how Virgin have taken one strand of their EVP and promoted it. And so many people just in this room have heard about it through the PR that something like that has got. So why were those organisations so keen to develop their employer brands? Well, there's loads of benefits of developing an employer brand and having an employer brand that is out there in the market and is something that your people are engaged with. It can absolutely win hearts. It can keep people in your organisation, but importantly as well, it can give you a way of communicating to all of the people you want to attract and the people that you've got already. I wanted to as well make sure that you've got facts and figures. Now, our research team brought together pages and pages of these facts. So if anyone is looking to build a business case around why employer branding is important, come and chat to us on the stand, and I'd be happy to share what is, I think, probably a 4 or 5 page document around the value of it. But a few figures here. So 54% increase in the quality of candidate pool was reported by employers that invested in employer branding for influence. 67% of job seekers said they'd accept a lower salary if the company had exceptional reviews online. And we all know that it's not always easy to be competitive and to give that higher salary to candidates. 83% of businesses agreed that employer brands have a significant impact on the ability to hire and retain staff, and a 43% in reduction in cost per hire for employers with strong employer brands. So there's really good evidence, there's really clear evidence as to why it's important. But I think what I wanted to then do as well is also explain that, yes, I showed 4 logos there of some, very big global organisations. But when we work with companies, it's not just about the big players that are out there as well. So I wanted to also show you sort of 5 case studies. I'm going to take you through the first 3, and then I'm going to hand over to Carl, who will talk about the last 2, because they're both organisations that are very, very different that Carl's worked within. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the National Audit Office. Now, we were approached by the National Audit Office in terms of helping them to show what their purpose was, so what they do as an organisation, and also to explain that auditing might not be as boring as everyone believes, and to show that actually the people within the National Audit Office have personality. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to understand, basically through employer branding, whether it was true or whether they were actually hoping for something that didn't really exist. So part of our research was to get into the organisation and to fully understand and immerse ourselves in what the National Audit Office was like. We wanted to have content for a toolkit for attraction, graduate attraction, but then also ensure that the career site had up-to-date content that could also be shared on social channels. So one of the things we did was we pulled together some video profiles, but we also took, and this video that you're going to see was actually taken from, I think, 12 or 14 different video profiles and composited to make one story of what the National Audit Office is all about. So I'm hoping that this will work. Their overarching employer brand message was change your world.
The NAO helps the nation spend wisely.
We look at how government spends money.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's a big job.
That means holding them to account for what they spend and how they spend it.
Yeah, we're auditors, really.
The NAO is the government's watchdog, I guess.
The scrutiny body for public finance. We check the accounts for government.
We report to Parliament.
We're fully independent, we're not civil servants here, we are Crown agents, which sounds really fancy.
We ensure value for money.
Save costs and minimise waste.
We all pay tax and we want to know that our tax is going on projects that are worthwhile.
The work of the NAO is incredibly influential.
At the heart of a lot of the issues that are taking place right now.
I don't think there was an MP who didn't draw on our work.
We're hugely influential not only with Parliament but with the media.
I love it when people come and tell me, we've made the front page.
Oh, I see you're in the news again. You wake up in the morning and you turn on the TV and there's your colleague on television.
When our reports are mentioned.
It can really push an issue to the front.
The NAO does really important work.
It really does impact on, whether books get to schools and drugs get to hospitals. It is kind of that crucial.
You're focusing on saving.
And we're talking billions, not tens of thousands here.
We work for everybody in the country.
Every single taxpayer.
Everything we do impacts on you.
Working for the NAO isn't all facts and figures.
We do look at real things that affect the life of real people.
We work all over the place.
Defence, hospitals,
GPs, dentists,
We do work with the BBC, Network Rail.
schools,
roads, buses.
the courts and criminal justice system.
One minute you might be on a farm counting sheep, the next minute you might be in one of the royal palaces.
I can't think of much that it doesn't affect.
We all want to know that that money is spent really wisely.
We just want to get the best value for money from the government for the people.
Accountants are definitely humans.
You feel you are doing something counts.
Yeah, it feels good.
I'm really proud. My dad is very proud.
We're more active, we're more of a voice.
We're able to speak without fear or favour.
I used to work in market research and I sold tomatoes. It doesn't give you the same feeling as I saved the NHS $2 billion today.
So what do we think? Are auditors boring? Okay. Each of the profile videos were housed across online channels as well, so that you could actually get to the story of each individual as well as seeing the composite video content there. The other example I wanted to just touch on as well is an employer brand project that we worked on during this year, and that's for MenCap. Now, when MenCap came to us, they'd been at one of the in-house recruiter events about a year ago, and they'd seen some work that we'd done for House of Fraser. And they approached us and said, we'd love to do what House of Fraser have done with their employer brand, but we're a charity, we don't have a huge budget. And one of the things we did with MenCap was we like to work with a number of charities each year. And one of the things that we did with MenCap was made sure that they could have something amazing on the small budget that they had. Myself, James, who's down here, we absolutely loved working on this project because I think one of the key things about MenCap was that they have high attrition and they know they have high attrition. And the issue with that is that they weren't necessarily attracting the right people because they weren't given an honest message as to how difficult it is to do the work that they do. And our objective was really to understand how challenging that work was and bring that to life through the employer brand. So the way that we went with it was to use a lot of the people and the service users within MenCap within all of the photography and video. So what you're going to see here includes both staff and people who the support workers look after as well. We developed their career site. We worked very closely with their in-house people to keep costs down. So they had a photographer, a videographer that we could work with that really helped in terms of the budget. And we worked with their digital team as well and their comms team throughout the whole of this project. So that we were equipping them, not so that they were relying on us for getting their employer brand out to market beyond attraction, but so that they could develop their own materials across all of the talent life cycle as well. So across internal comms, all the different forms of people comms.
It's lovely, it's wonderful.
It sounds a bit corny, but it doesn't just feel like a job. It feels like you've actually got a purpose every day when you come to work, which is wonderful, to be honest with you.
I mean, I must admit, I'm going to be honest, sometimes I go home and I feel quite drained because I've used all my emotions and everything of me while I've been at work, so I can go home a bit drained.
Excited about where MenCap is going. Very proud. I feel extremely proud to work for MenCap. And the last word, extremely challenging. Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a really warm feeling. You kind of go home thinking, you know what, today weren't too bad. You know, today was a good day.
It's like working at a holiday camp, it really is. You know, you have your laughs and you have some tears every now and then, but you know, it always ends in a big hug and you know, a few giggles. It's just so fun.
It's really already made a positive impact on my quality of life and has given me a lot more meaning in my personal life.
I feel very motivated as well. Yeah, that's it. I feel really valued and motivated.
I still feel that I'm learning every day as well.
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
Like people with support.
I wouldn't change my job for the world.
No.
Not for the world.
I think sometimes I feel like I get more out of it than the person who was support.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah. It sometimes felt like my second home because we spend so much time here.
I felt proud and I felt like my confidence has come up each day.
Working at MenCap doesn't feel like a job. I have fun pretty much every day. Don't get me wrong, we have our ups and downs, but that's kind of what makes MenCap MenCap, and working with lovely people and doing something where we really are making differences to people's lives and knowing that we've had an impact on someone's life as well is just amazing. Yeah.
MenCap's not just a charity, it's a way of life. That's cheesy enough.
All of those videos were done completely unscripted. And I think that really shows the authenticity of what people really feel like to work there. I think the next example will probably be quite interesting following the presentation this morning, because this is for another food business. And this is for Kerry Foods, who, similar to Two Sisters, they describe themselves to us as one of the biggest businesses that nobody's ever heard of. And their objective for their employer brand was to enable their values to be talked about and developed externally as well as internally. And their values are exceptionally strong and quite different. So they have things like on it as a value. And I think, you know, one of the things we found with Kerry Foods was that those values are absolutely lived and breathed throughout all of the organisation. When we were given the brief for this project, what we were asked to do was to make sure the employer brand was about food, but was also about their people and the unique characters and personalities that exist within Kerry Foods. So one of the things that we did was we decided that we had to have food, but we didn't want the food within the work that we did not to look beautiful. So that meant there was a lot of work involved. This image here shows that one of the things we did was we took each value, and each value had a food scene that related to it. These were made of real food. So every product that you see within here is either an ingredient of the foods that Kerry Foods produce, or it is the finished product. So, for example, they supply, well, Richmond sausages, I'm sure everyone has heard of, cheese strings. They provide, I think, about 90% of all the margarines and spreads into the supermarkets. That was probably the highlight of our insight when I visited the margarine and lard factory. And I think ultimately they are a really innovative business. But when we started with the food scenes, what we also wanted to do was to make sure that the people who were in those scenes were actually real Kerry Foods people. Now, they couldn't be used at full size, so what we decided to do was model. So we created models by taking people within Kerry Foods on a two-day away day, and what they did in that period of time was they were 3D modelled, so they were taken round, and you'll see it on the film in a minute, They were taken round so that we could create a 3D model of those individuals. Those models were then put into the food scenes for the photography, and each of the people who took part had their little model that they could have on their desks. And our intention is that we keep modelling people, building the stories, building the content, because it's definitely felt within Kerry Foods that it's the people who make them such a successful business. These were the values. I've just touched on one of them, but ownership, courage, open-minded, on it, better together, and forward-looking. So really different, and we developed tons and tons of examples of exactly why these values needed to be a really strong part of their employer brand.
Today we've got our employer brand coming to life through our employees. So we have about 14 employees flying in, training, carring it here to Egham, which is our head office, and we'll be filming them today. So their own personal story of Kerry Foods, whatever that looks like in whatever form.
It had to be about food and it had to be about people. What we wanted to do was to make sure we involved real Kerry Foods people, their real stories, and get those in throughout the whole project.
So we'll be body scanning them for some mini models that we'll be using as part of their story on our careers website, and then we'll be sprinkling them throughout our actual website itself.
We're here today scanning employees of Kerry Food to be turned into little figures. We're going to add them into pictures of food.
We've done a shoot already where we've created food models. So what we wanted to do is take it a step further and make it more real. We're going to get the little 3D models from today's shoot. We're going to then photograph them, put them in situ and tell the Kerry Food story.
It's about bringing our employer brand to life. It's about getting people to really connect with us. We have great values in this company. It's about getting people outside to understand that and really feel the passion that we feel internally.
Here at Kerry Foods, the values were very well embedded. Our job really has just been to take them further, bring them to life, connect them to their people, and to actually use them in all of the marketing materials for the employer brand.
People are everything. They're the heart and soul of the business. Without people, you have really nothing. So I guess today is an opportunity to take our soul and really amplify it to the external audience.
It's about, how different characters and different people really bring the company to life.
I've literally just come off the scanner. It is weird and wonderful, and there's thousands of little photos being taken at any one time.
The model scan is something that we've never done before. I've never seen happen before. So yeah, really cool.
We are a bold business, and I was really keen on doing something completely new and unique. And I think we've done it here today. It's Sarah!
And there's nothing worse than watching yourself on video. So I'm going to hand you over to Carl now, who's going to talk to you about two more examples of employee branding that relate to two of the places that you've worked with us.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. We'll work out which one it is. As you can see, I've got huge amounts of notes here. So I'm Carl du Plessis, the NHS guy. To put that fire out, I'm NHS for the last 12 months. Prior to that, I did a huge amount of other things, so I'm not an embedded NHS guy, so I'm perhaps not that typical of somebody in the NHS who's been there throughout their whole career. Fortunately, my boss saw that as a good thing. Wanted to bring in something different, so that's why I'm there now and enjoying it. I think I'm going to talk you through two things. One of them is local here to Manchester, so I was at the Co-op Bank just after they split from Co-op Group, and huge challenges there, not only in the industry and what have you. And then obviously something that I've just done more recently at NHS and in my trust. So I'm London North West Healthcare Trust. It's a lovely title. You try getting that into brand. It'll be even better when we get university status, which we're about to get. So it's London North West Healthcare University Trust, which is going to be brilliant. You've listened to the expert, and obviously he has been able to show it all. I'm hopefully going to bring it a little bit more real. You know, we have problems with our exec, we have problems with budget and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to take you on the journey I go through when I look at an employer brand for wherever it is I am. I think for me, there's a couple of things you need to know before you even start on the journey. And this all goes to creating your employer brand. And I guess the first one is, first and foremost, the industry you're in. What is it? What's the challenges? And the market within that. I think you've also got to understand your corporate reputation in there. So you've got to get in touch with your commercial people, the people who are selling your products if they're doing that. You've also got to be aware of your external comms teams, because their message to market to sell a product will be different if you selling it, and I'll touch on that as I go through there. You've also got to know your audience, and I think we often, and a lot of the times, we look at our target audience being the people we're looking to attract in. I also look at it as the people I've got. If people are thinking of leaving, they're going to be out in the market, they're going to be looking. Let's reconfirm to them why it's good to stay, and if we can stop them leaving, we've saved a hire. So when you look at your target audience, don't just look at the external ones, look at the internal ones as well. We've mentioned it already, be truthful. And I also say bring out your dead. You know, don't hide things. If it's a challenging environment, talk about it. Because actually, that'll float some people's boat, and they're the people you want there. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is it might be challenging today. You overcome those challenges. Those people who you attracted in the first place may then leave, and you need a different type of brand or EVP. So this is always going to be a continuous journey. Bit of housekeeping. Who's going to sign it off? You know, kind of, I've done stuff in the past, and you've gone and then you've shown it to the exec, and they've gone, nah, because they don't get it. They haven't been on the journey. So make sure you engage people who are going to be signing it off from the very early days, okay? And last thing is, until you've got all that information together and you understand it all, don't start getting creative. I have a natural habit of going, yeah, we're going to have an employer brand. Hey, we could do this with nurses. We could do that. We could do this. And then I listen to all the information, and those ideas are stupid and redundant, and it was a waste of time. It's almost like planning your lottery winnings before you've actually realised you only won £2.50. Okay, so don't worry about that. So the first one we're looking at is cooperative bank. So not only was the banking industry in trouble when I was there, we'd also just found a £4 billion black hole in our finances. We had a senior manager who enjoyed topics that weren't quite tasteful for everybody, in toilets and things like that. So we didn't actually have that good a reputation. And that was the perception was there. What I did do, though, is on the market, I spoke to our commercial people. And when they were going out there and selling our products, actually, we were one of the few banks that people didn't think, you're out to get us. You're out there to rip us off. Nobody thought that of the cooperative bank. They realised we'd made some mistakes, and we were there. So we needed to bring that out in what we were doing. We'd also just split up from Co-op Group, so there was lots of change. There was limited infrastructure. There was those kind of things. So we needed to do that. So what we had to do is we had to come up with an idea that kind of could bring out the dead, but of course we're selling services about looking after your money, and this is where you have to understand what your commercial and your sales guys are trying to do. So looking after people's money is really important, and you've got to be trustworthy to do that. So you can't go out and say, hey, we've made mistakes, because then all of a sudden, if that's next to an advert, come and lend us your money, it's going to be there. So you've got to be careful about that, and you've got to understand what you're doing. But it is important to be honest, because people knew that it's tough at the bank, and people knew that actually you want them to know that you're on a journey, and you want to bring them in so they know that actually they can help make the difference, and they can improve on things for you. It was also just about the time that we'd brought out our TV adverts for the first time in a long time. I don't know if you remember the tattoos and things like that. So we were okay to be a little bit edgy, and that was the thing about getting sign-off. So we were pitched an idea. I couldn't get it past exec, and you'll find out why. It was the left-hand one there. But the principles remained the same, okay? No, we're not complete, but we're actually ethical people, and we're learning and we're going on the journey. So that one didn't get past exec. But the other one did, where there's 3 dirty words associated with the bank, community gardening projects. Because what came through from our research was that actually, yeah, there's a noise, but we're an ethical bank. The people are ethical. When you interviewed everybody, when you spoke to everybody who worked for us, they actually cared passionately about it. Not opening bank accounts with people or businesses that were unethical, looking at where we lended our money, that kind of stuff there. And that actually ran through the cooperative bank in droves. Everybody, all the way down the levels. And that was important for us to get out there. So we did start off with a nice campaign there, an idea of we're not complete, but we changed it a little bit to go into those areas there. And that became our kind of take on how we're going to attract people. We wanted something that draws people in, gives them a bit of hang time on our adverts that are at, oh, that's, what, no. And the longer they're hanging onto your advert, in whatever format it's at, then they start to process it, and then you can start to draw them in with the rest of the story about what you're doing well. And we use that, obviously, across all of our internet, all of the medias we were using, and it was able to get there. The great thing about the idea and the principle of putting the ban in banking was we could use different topics for different areas of the business. And that's something else to bear in mind, is that you're not always going to have one idea that you can use to hire bankers, to hire call center staff, to hire people in change and transformation and those kind of things. So the brand had to be a standard big idea, which is one of the areas we look at. And our big idea was to have this kind of concept, but we could then use it in other areas. So when you're talking about call centers, blah, 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 and then it goes on, you've heard it all before, and we go through that. But it's a consistent message that goes all the way through in what we were doing to get people to understand it. The other thing we needed to stand out was, if you'd looked at any of the other financial institutes who were moving up to Manchester at the time, so this is a few years ago now, there was lots of competition. RBS was opening something up here and those kind of things. And again, when you looked at what everybody else was doing, it was people around a table looking at things, iPads open in meetings, come and join us as a bank, and we wanted to stand out. And I think we achieved it. We stood out. We made some good impacts on our recruitment. But most importantly, actually, it created a buzz within the organisation as well. So some of the slightly other ones that we were still able to get past exec, shut up and listen, if it means doing the right thing. Okay, so it's what you'll say to people. We swear a lot. We swear by what we believe in. And that was the concept that we used as we rolled it out throughout there. So that's Co-op Bank for you. Move forward, I think go to a totally separate industry, the NHS. And I think to give you a bit of background about the market, who here works in the NHS or the civil service? Okay, who here works for the NHS? Okay, so unfortunately, I'm not going to cure all the ills of the NHS, and I think and hopefully it'll resonate, because I'm pretty much an outsider coming into the NHS. And I see the NHS as this huge industry on its own. It's got its own gravity. And by that, I mean lots of people who go into it never leave, and they stay in there. And then I also looked at the NHS, and this is the stuff that we started to do before we got onto our branding. Well, what drives it? What drives the industry? Well, actually, the NHS is a fairly young organisation in my eyes. So it's about 80 years old. It was created by senior doctors. Doctors by nature are command and control. They are reactive, transactional type people, because in the day job that they do, people walk in, they have to deal with it, and if it's an emergency, they have to gather everybody around them and control the situation. And so that's naturally what they're like. When you build an industry on the basis of that, you get a very command and control industry, and you get an environment like that. That also goes through to our funding, how we're funded. It's all on the transactions that we do. There's very little for future planning and that kind of stuff. So that's the industry we're in, and there's a lot of people who don't move around it. As an industry, and you look at nurses, you look at doctors, care assistants, you look at all across there, actually people want to come into it because they understand what it is working in those environments. I'm not trying to look at how can I attract people into the NHS. I'm looking at how I can attract them into my trust. So the ones who are there already, how can I attract them into my trust? And it's a dilemma I've had in my head, because if I'm stealing from somebody else, then they've got a problem, because there's only such a market. But part of me is going, well, if I can up the ante in my area, or if we can do it, that'll be seen externally. And if everybody else then does it, Actually, everybody externally will see it, and that'll hopefully attract more people into the NHS as well. I don't have a job with NHS employers where I could look at how we could attract more nurses, but it gets more complex, and we're not going to do that. So the industry is what it is. The people, my target audience, are people who've already decided to join the NHS. They've decided to be a nurse. They've decided to be a doctor. So actually, it's pointless me trying to advertise things or have an employer brand that is, hey, we've got a nursing job where you can look after people. Because they know that. We need to find something different. And so we need to talk to our staff. What is it we're actually doing? What is it that we're interested in? We also need to be truthful. It's tough. London North East Healthcare Trust, one of the largest integrated trusts in the UK. We've got 4 hospitals under us in community. It's 9,000 people. 9,000 people in some areas isn't a big organisation. For us, it's actually quite a large organisation. But it's diverse. It's come about from a lot of mergers. So people still talk of Ealing Hospital or Norfolk Park Hospital. They don't see us as a trust. And there's problems there as well. So it's a challenge, okay? But everybody cares about it, and that's where we go through. And that's the message we got out of there. And it was only in doing the interviews with staff, talking about what happens out there, is we came upon our big idea. So what is it that we're going to have for the trust as the one thing that will sit on every advert we put out, on every communication we put out, and that kind of stuff. The speaking from the heart bit was as well, we'd also just launched our heart values. So it's honesty, equality, and it goes through and makes heart. Accountability, respect, and trust. Okay, so the skill shortages are there, and we're there. So I talked about the journey that we did in understanding it, and our big idea that we've agreed to do is wholehearted, not faint-hearted. That's our tagline, and that's something we're going to put on everything we do. And when I talk to people in the trust about it, they kind of go, I get the wholehearted bit, it's the faint-hearted bit. And then they think about it and go, actually, that's right. And that's the thing about the truth. We're not for the faint-hearted. If you want to join, if you want to work in the NHS and you want to be in a smaller hospital, it's not an acute hospital where things, it's not easy anywhere, but are a little easier. If you want to work in an organisation that's fully formed and the hospital's been around and it hasn't integrated and got all those challenges, then absolutely fine. There are places for you to go. For us, if you want to come and join London North East Healthcare Trust, we're wholehearted, but we're not faint-hearted. And that's our unique selling point. And on that, because we are so big, we can offer big opportunities for people. There's every single job in the NHS pretty much in our trust alone. So why go anywhere else? Provided you can work in a big organisation and you're not faint-hearted. And that's the messaging we're getting out there. We have taken it one stage further. So that badge is going to be there. And it's going to be something that we use across everywhere. And when we're at events, we'll have them and we'll sticker them out and we'll do all of that. The other thing is, how do we get across the fact that we're a large trust? Okay, so in the eyes of the NHS, we're a large trust. And we could just say, we're 4 hospitals. We do X amount. But we're going along the lines of, well, actually, we have over 1 million pillowcases used for admitted patients. 1 million pillowcases is what we have to deal with in a year. Now, if you're a nurse, they're the banes of everybody's lives because you can never find a pillow. You're always fluffing them up or changing them every time you're doing it. And that's something that'll attract. If we're looking at finance people, we'll say we deal with 200,000 invoices a year. So the finance people know that's something there. That's the other thing about what we're looking at on employer brand. Try and get out a message there that people don't know about your company. Okay, I worked at Royal Mail. We did a big thing around IT recruitment. And of course, Royal Mail, brilliant. You want to be a postman? Hey, we've got no problem getting those people in. Try and get them into IT. But the minute you tell them we have 80,000 PDAs, we have one of the largest IT infrastructures in the world, ooh, that's interesting to an IT person. So get the messages out there that people don't know. Back on here, though, obviously NHS, we go through, and what's important for us is the story on here, is that yes, we are big, but as you read through it, it goes down to one team, and that's what we then portray in the pictures. So there's a journey on there. There's 3 aspects to our brand. There's the big idea, the wholehearted, not faint-hearted bit. There's the commentary behind there, which is about us, and kind of explaining what it is we're at. And then there's the visuals, and the visuals are our people. Now the bit around, don't get all creative before you see all the information. In my mind, I'd actually said I would fail if I had a brand that had a nurse in a uniform standing next to a patient, or even a nurse or a doctor in their uniform, because it's about the people. It also goes where you get sign-off. In that, although in these images here we don't have it, we do in others and we will in others as well. Because when I listen to the information, the pride that nurses have in their uniform is really important. Okay? And whilst they are looking at the individuals, they also want to know that it's a profession they're proud of and if it's there externally. So you've got to listen, and you've got to, you know, if you're leading on it, be adaptable to change on there. And again, we're trying to make it a little bit funner. We're not trying to look at people, you know, because if you go through the videos and if you go through the commentary about it, is people have a purpose, but actually a lot of them, whilst it's challenging, and they will leave, a bit like MenCat, they will leave really kind of tired sometimes, but they've done something well. And as a team unit, it's there. And that'll be important in our photography, that we are showing that we are a team unit. And actually, it's a team that works well together. So I think, to sum up, that's my 2 case studies that I've had here and where I've taken it. And hopefully it gives you some kind of structure that I take when I approach it, when I'm putting one in. And I think this kind of comes from both Sarah and myself around things on summing up, is don't have to be a huge corporate brand. I think the other thing on there is, well, you've got one already, is what Sarah said. It's how you control it before it controls you. You don't have to have a huge budget. If you understand your message to market, you don't have to do everything flash as long as you put it consistently and you have that message consistently around there. A good-looking employer brand is more than cosmetic. The feel that I get when people see wholehearted, not faint-hearted, and it's going around, and this is newly released. I can't give you any stats on how it's improved our recruitment, but what I can do is give you impact on everybody who's seen it. It's gone, yeah, that's us. And you can make them feel a little bit better, and you can see it when we've done all of that on there. Who knows, maybe I'll come back on another day and I'll give you all the stats on it as well. You see, this is my way of getting some more airtime. But we'll do that some other time. But it's got to make the company feel right, and the people who see it have got to understand it, and it's got to hit them in the gut. Yes, it can help you attract and engage and retain the best people. And for me, that's the best thing, is if it retains people and reminds them why they joined in the first place, it'll naturally attract them. You know, as recruitment people, if we don't lose people, we don't need to recruit, and that makes our lives easier. And that's what I look for in a brand. Will it keep the people who are there? And I think that's it. Any questions?